Greetings. Welcome to Move 59. And this is a single session. It's our first composer forum in our second season. And with us today are four guests. They are Lois Vierk. You can maybe wave right now. John, are you Lois? Just kidding, John. Just kidding. Okay, and then Juhani Vesikkala, probably Vesikkala.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello.
And we have Eduardo Caballero.
Hi.
And we have Elia Koussa. And these four musicians, composers, are in four different parts of the world. And they are very active in creation. The word microtonal may not have to be used in their music. And it makes for an interesting polemic, the importance of using the words microtone, microtonality, in advance of people listening to the product, which is the piece of music that's created. And it's not just created in the head, but it has to be made manifest. And these four individuals know how to do that. So basically they can produce their own material. And a seemingly unexpected commonality is these four composers weave through sound. I mean, I'd like to also ask all of you to make a comment in terms of what your feelings are about Xenakis, who just had a big feature in the New York Times without any Xenakis concerts coming up, based on his, I guess, 100th anniversary of his birth. And I just somehow feel like he's a very interesting touchstone, although all four of you don't write music at all like Xenakis in a visceral sense, in terms of how it feels. But yet there may be something there. And I think I'd like to just ask each of you to just maybe introduce yourself, maybe give a small biography, share where you are, give us a taste of your personality, and then we'll go from there. It doesn't matter order, and I hope you can stay with us today, for the full 1.5 hours, and if possible, we go to 2, based on how exciting things go. Juhani, you were here before, so you have the best sense of the group. Why don't you start?
Yes. Yep, sure. So thank you, Johnny, and great to see you all. So I'm here for a second time. I'm a Finnish composer. I did my PhD just recently, 1 week ago. I defended my dissertation in Prague, in Czechia. And so I'm 32 years old. My work is divided in composing and teaching and singing. So I would say most of my influences come from this fruitful interplay between singing new works and then talking with composers, also organizing festivals of microtonal music, noise music, and then getting all those influence to my own music as well. So I would think I do think a bit theoretically and compose a bit theoretically. So I think then the mention of Xenakis' work is really apt here. And formalized music, for example, has brought me a lot of things to think about, like sieve systems, for example. So I think he's a central figure also for microintervallic composers. So I would say I'm a microintervallic composer, not a microtonal composer necessarily, because lots of my practice also involves noise, and the systems are not tonal. So it's not necessarily atonal. It might be like centric, or there might be some other systems at play in my music.
And Juhani, you know,
So
just
great
so
to be
you,
here.
you know, even with the experience you had with the one day, we've talked about this, you know, for a season, and we're coming to the conclusion that we're going to start the second season with this obvious thing that's not obvious, which is that when we talk, we're using words, we're using verbal intelligence. We're not using music intelligence when we talk. So, you know, we're trying to find the right words to describe ourselves that sometimes are interpreted differently by others. Eduardo, this for you is a big deal. You know, we're using words. And so I'm dismissing the words, really. Because when I talk to you, I know we speak music intelligence. And, you know, just the fact that you can shake your head, yes, is exactly the evidence. So please take your time. Tell us about your life experience that brought you so that you encouraged microtonality. You reveled in the people who did it. You went from a northern Mexico base to Paraguay, to places I've not been. So you have something to say about the response that you get, and also what you think is important to get in your music.
The microtonality for me is always is of the beginning for I compose is very natural. It's not like inside to the new or is new, but it's not a sound world like artificiality. I don't know, for me, the microtonality in my music, always when I compose the material in quarter tones or a little less, is very natural, always. When my first piece, when I use microton is, I don't know, the idea is with microton, no, I think in microton. The idea is original with microton. And all my piece is the same in this way. It's very important. Sometimes it's difficult with work with musicians sometimes, but I think in Mexico right now in this time is more easy. More musicians play microtonality or microtones. This is great for me because I work a lot with musicians and new pieces. You know, it's very natural.
Is that cultural? Specific to Mexico?
Julian Carrillo is very, of course, very important. The music of Carrillo is very romantic. It's very interesting because it's romantic and in quarter tones or different. But it's interesting. I don't have a research of this topic, but for example, the mariachi in Mexico is all the country. The mariachi, of course, is very important. But when you listen the mariachi in Mexico, the trumpets, the violins, all the time, the beginning or the end of the serenata of the concert, no concert, the serenata in the party. All the pieces is not how would say this? It's not temperamento. It's not exactly. But I think it is an accident. It's not. But this accident for me is very good. This accident to know the temperamento is a little high. More like, I think, more like I don't know, say in English, is more like partials or harmonic series. A little high, a little low, depends of the pass note. But I don't know. It's very interesting. Your question. This is natural. This is the culture in Mexico. I don't have a research for this topic, but this example from Marachi part for me is very important. When I listen to Marachi perfectly, I don't know. It's not the same. It's not like real.
It's not authentic.
Yeah, it's not like authentic. But it's not, for me. It's not bad. The different desafinación. For me, it's not bad quality for Marachi. For me, no. For me, it's the essence. Uh-huh.
I want to go further with you, but I also want to introduce now the next person, and we'll come back.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I bring in Lois Vierk. And Lois, it's a pleasure to see you here. I've known about you for a very long time living in New York. But it's funny how, when I guess I felt I was sort of in the trenches, doing these concerts of microtonal music. And, knowing you were there was great, but I just didn't always have a chance to, because, you were so successful. You were so in your own thing. You didn't need any help. I saw you study with Dean Drummond. And Dean Drummond, he and we had a real competition actually in New York. And, and, it's kind of interesting when I looked into your background, with Leonard Stein, who is actually Lamont Young's teacher. And he told me that. And also, maybe new to you, or maybe not, Harold Seletsky. Did you know Harold?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry, but certainly Dean, Lamont Young. I think you're in touch with John Schneider also.
Oh, yes.
A lot. Yeah, so I'm still in touch with John Schneider. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned New York. So I've made my, home in New York ever since the 80s. But before that, I studied with Leonard Stein in Los Angeles. And at the same time, I was first going to UCLA and then to CalArts. So I went to California to study something non-Western. I really didn't know what I was going to do, but UCLA at that time and continuing has a wonderful ethnomusicology department and really hands-on lessons, which at that time, now I'm talking back to the 70s, you couldn't really find in the US except at UCLA or in Hawaii.
So you went through Gagaku.
Yes.
You went through, and I wouldn't say went through, but you got to work with Morton Subotnick.
Yeah.
And gets Mel Powell.
Yes.
And so, you have and with Dean as well, you have a huge coterie of, I think, connections to Western art tradition and its alternatives.
Yes. And, I really react positively to what Eduardo has to say about listening to mariachi. So no, I don't know anything about mariachi except I really enjoy it, but I know nothing about it. But I was actively playing gagaku for about 12 years. And after getting my education in California, I also went to Japan for a couple of years to continue studying gagaku, which is Japanese court music. It's called the oldest continuous musical tradition in the world. And studying, especially in Japan, I tried to do it in a more traditional way, which for me meant not using any notation. There is a notation for the instruments, and I played a transverse flute called juteki. So there is a tablature notation, but the traditional way is that a person, and we're going way back, so it's only boys, but I was the odd one, and there were some other women who were playing gagaku very well in Japan. So what you would do as a young child is you would listen to your teacher sing the vocal part to all the melodies. In other words, the notation I was looking at had nothing to do with the vocal part. Well, it did. It's a little bit hard to explain, but what I would do is I would listen to a recording of my teacher. He made a cassette recording for all of the main pieces. Excuse me, Vitold, could you give me Johnny back? It's a little bit easier for me to.
I'm right here.
Okay, thank you. On my screen. Okay.
Yeah, it's voice operated.
Oh.
So you could change your view in the upper right corner.
Okay.
And then you
Okay.
can see everyone. We're all here.
Okay. All right. Sorry, everybody, for this technical glitch. I mean, I'm older than anybody here, so you have to give me some leeway. But at any rate, instead of learning pieces by looking with my eyes at the notation, I was learning all the pieces by hearing the recordings and having the music like enter your body, your soul by ear. I found like just so much, so very deep.
One thing we discovered, Lois, is that we discovered this from someone in Japan, that the no flute, which is maybe different than the flute you played,
yes,
does not have a tuning. It's like a found tuning, and every no flute is different.
Yeah, I don't know about the no flute. I just know it's a beautiful instrument. I don't know. I'm partial to the Japanese flutes of any culture that I've heard. It is, again, a bamboo flute, and it's wrapped in cherry bark and lacquered, just like the flute that I play. But in gagaku, there is a definite tuning. It's different for every mode. In other words, if I'm playing a pattern that it could either stay on the pitch F, or for example, or it could move up to G, there would be different patterns. It could be like do, da, do, da, do, da, da. Okay? But if I wanted, that was a bad example. Here's another example. Do, do, da, ah. I don't have perfect pitch. So in other words, there were ornaments that would make sense of the pitches in the melody. If the melody wanted to move up from F to G, it might go do, da, do, da, fa.
This is wonderful, fascinating. It will lead me to a further discussion with you about the movement of gestures.
Yes. Uh-huh.
As it develops to slides.
Yes, that's right.
And so that's what I came across with what you were doing.
Okay.
But first, let's now move to Elia Koussa, who he was surprised he's here today because I had thought someone else could be here, but they were ill. This is the era of being ill. And so that is not always a surprise. It's something you just hope they get better soon. And I came across something that Elia had put together where he took maqam and he harmonized it. But he did it from within the culture. So the ethnos would call that emic as opposed to edik. And it's the best, it's the highest level when somebody within the culture expands the culture. It's a fascinating thing that does happen everywhere. Sometimes I know the names of the people, sometimes I don't. But it's the way that things proceed. It makes me, Elia, makes me think of the earlier period of nationalism when Sibelius is on the scene and Carl Nielsen for the Danes, and you have, Hungarian composers for the first time. And we call this we meaning I don't even want to say I'm part of the we in this case, but the so-called scholars of the era talk about this as the age of nationalism. And they see it as a political thing, of course, but it's also the excitement that the rest of the world feels when there's a new voice that can rearrange the vocabulary as previously established in a fresh way. So it's not just the individual's new voice, which we celebrate today, but it's the introducing of a new voice that is a culture that's coming in. Mm-hmm. And I think you may be doing that. So I now turn this over to you. Please tell us.
Yeah. I've always searched for kind of harmony because to the very melodic Arabic music or the maqamat, or it's very melodic music with lots of ornaments. But I've always felt that I'm more. I preferred always harmony. I'm not a very melodic person in nature, and I wanted to find a kind of harmony to this, to these traditional melodies that we have, but it was very difficult before I went to Germany. In Lebanon, the Arabic musicians are still very traditional. It's very hard to accept a new concept, you cannot harmonize, and even when they harmonize some melodies, they use the Western harmony, and this is not good, I think, because it becomes like a kind of a fusion, and I didn't want to make fusion.
Price in there. Do them at Little Church.
Excuse me. And so there are two things that are important to me in microtonality, and this is first the maqamat, the Arabic genera, and second it's overtones. And I will show later a piece that might show I will show what I mean by that piece, where I use the overtone system and have from these overtones the different genera, Arabic maqamat, or Genera.
I'd like to point out, though, that you've written for 19-tone trumpet.
Yes. Yeah,
And
it
you-
was a piece.
And you do use exact quarter tones in addition to maqam tuning. And you know,
Exact.
they're not the same.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I'm going to be very excited to hear this. You know, this is a very interesting take. I know that you were here last week and you saw
Yeah.
a presentation of a more general view of, let's say, more Egyptian culture.
Mm.
And, you know, does the Lebanese culture musically stand out that differently? I mean, I do know about Feiruz, you know, and I do know about the Rahbani brothers. And,
Yeah.
you know, and I also know that Lebanon is in some very tough straits right now.
Yeah, right now, yes. Yes. Yes, it's a little bit different. I think originally there were two different cultures. The old Egyptians, the old times. You know, in Lebanon there were the Phoenicians and the Syriac also culture. So there might be differences, but later with the Arabic culture, there were more common things. So now I think the maqamat that we use are the same, whether in Egypt or in Lebanon, but it's a bit different in the small things, like maybe in the small intervals, and yes.
Is there any noticeable Phoenician music inheritance?
We don't know about that. No.
Okay, that's a good introduction, and we will come back to you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining this conversation. Now, let me go now to Lois, if I could. Lois, you have a piece called River Beneath the River. And it comes from a Mexican theme. Eduardo, I don't know if you recognize this. River Beneath the River is, I don't remember the Spanish words that you took it from. Paz.
Actually, I did check this out with a Spanish-speaking friend of mine, but I don't speak Spanish. Sorry, Eduardo. Rio, abajo, Rio, something like that. Does that make sense? Anyhow, the meaning of the term, as I've read about in books and also with my friend from Honduras, it means the river beneath the river is like the meaning under the meaning. And I took it to mean for myself, like the deepest expression of the soul. And so that's why I titled my piece River Beneath the River. And I'll tell you that titles come after the piece is written. So it wasn't like I started with that image or anything. But I start by sketching a lot of materials and then kind of put them together into a piece, or, I throw most of them away, but I put what I think goes together into a piece. So the sounds actually reminded me of sort of the flow of a river, a lot of glissandi, a lot of sliding tones, and it reminded me of water moving. So putting those things together, I ended up with that title, River Beneath the River. What more can I tell you?
Yes. So I wanted to see if I can play some of that for you.
Yeah, I gave Vitold, you have the whole piece, which maybe there's not time for, I don't know. The whole piece is 14 minutes, but I gave Vitold suggestions for 3 different excerpts, which would one at the beginning of the piece, one in sort of the middle of the piece, and one at the end of the piece.
Yes. I am having a...
This is for a string quartet, by the way. It was originally commissioned by the Kronos Quartet, but the recording is not by the Kronos.
Right. Oh, it's not?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. So just give me 1 second. I'm trying to set this up.
Do you have the, Johnny, are you playing it, or Vitold, are you playing it?
Vitold, let me ask you.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble just right now going right to it. So Lois, give us a second. I'm going to go do that. We're going to get to that soon. But rather than focus on that now, I'm going to go to another piece that I have ready. And then we're going to just clean that up because he did send it to me this morning. And I just have to figure out where it is right now. So if you don't mind, we're going to just move ahead to Eduardo. We're going to come right back to you afterwards.
Okay, sure.
All right. Thank you. So Eduardo, we move ahead to you right now as we find her things. You did know that Mexican saying?
No,
No. Okay. So it is
sorry.
either
Yeah,
way.
I'm not sure it's from Mexico, actually. It's from some place. I'm sorry. It's a Spanish saying, but perhaps not from Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to now share screen. And we're going to try to go to this. Kurtosis. there's no good place to stop this piece. I'm sorry. I could not find a more elegant way. And so I was doing my music intelligence and accenting the dissonance. And just I stopped because, it's enthralling, and then it goes on for another 6 or 7 minutes. So Eduardo, thank you for, something that I'd never heard of yours until today, and it's beautiful. You don't have to say you're there. Oh, that's interesting. Excuse me 1 second. Okay, so I have to once again bring myself back to Zoom. So thank you again. And I think, Lois, the best thing to do before I find your particular selection is go to Elia, because he's going to run it himself. And while he's doing that, I can find it. If I have to present someone else, I won't be able to do it. I can't do it while I'm presenting. So can I do that with you now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. So maybe Elia, present your the piece that we were talking about.
In fact, what you have heard was the last piece that I shared on Facebook. You've seen that on Facebook, maybe? It's from a suite for violin and microtonal piano, but it is not yet recorded. But I have made like a kind of a version on Cubase, but I don't know if I will play it now. But there is a piece that I can show you, which was composed in 2005 when I was student in Germany, and I can show you maybe what the main idea that has been developed later. And this is a piece called Ta'ammul in Arabic, or meditation, like I will share now. The passage, I will show you this passage, which is here. It is originally for 6 instruments: flute, clarinet, violin, viola, cello, and piano. Here, this passage, there is the violin playing a maqam on E flat. It is called the Bayati. E flat, F half flat, G flat, and later A flat. Then the piano. So this is what I have been experimenting with the piano at the time. Inside the piano, the strings on the lower strings, and this is. I put it here, play while muting with the finger on the string inside the piano and moving it. So we get the higher overtones. And when I listened to them at the time carefully, I listened to some Arabic genera. So any Arabic musician or listener can hear that and can know that this 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th overtones are in fact what we call a Saba, the Saba tetrachord. It is the 3/4 tones plus 3/4 tones plus semitone. And then I added here the F, it's the 18th overtone. I could play that inside the piano. And this idea was just like a discovery for me, because I thought that I could see my tradition in a new light, it's it's not only the melodic tradition or the monodic tradition. It could be also harmonic, because this is from the harmonic series from the spectrum, and the piece was developed from this idea, and this B part is actually the dance, and it's written in a way that is very close to the Arabic texture, Arabic music texture, that is the heterophony. So, for example, here everyone is playing an E flat, but each one differently, his own way, and so it is very close in spirit to the Arabic music. But I don't call it Arabic music yet. Maybe it's some impression of that. Okay, so and the whole piece, I hear it like playing in the spectrum of E flat. The E flat is always present. So maybe I will play this part here, so you can hear what I meant. Maybe I will make also share sound. Can you hear that?
Can you make it louder?
Yes. One moment. And maybe not. I'm not sure. It's low. Yes. It was not heard.
That was better.
Yeah.
We
Okay,
were able to hear it, but it was a little bit soft, but not to that
Okay,
extent
no problem.
that it wasn't audible. But
Okay,
we were able to hear that part.
Anyway, I will play the next part. So that's it.
Very
And
interesting. Yes.
thank you.
So if you could unshare screen.
Yes.
Thank you so much. You know, it's just Zoom, if you start too softly, doesn't make it seem like it's loud enough. I think it's a Zoom issue. We tried to play Charles Ives' The Unanswered Question once. Didn't work because it started too softly. So everybody was saying, oh, I can't hear it, but actually that's what it was, you know? So that's just a kind of interesting peculiarity of the venue. You know, where Zoom is now a venue, right? You know, a supra venue. So thank you for that. And now I'm going to go back to Lois right now, because Lois, I'm all set for you. And let's just go right into this, unless you want to start again about River Beneath the River.
I just wanted to ask you, are you playing the sound file that I sent you?
I will be, yes.
Okay, so you have a choice. You can either play the whole piece, which is probably too long, or you can play the excerpts that I sent to Vitold.
I don't know if I have the excerpts. I have...
No, you'd have to fast forward through the file. Can you do that?
Well, you can tell me, oh, you mean just drop different places?
Yeah. So if you want to play like the first couple minutes, and then I'll tell you where to go to.
All right. Here we go.
And I just want to mention these, shout out to the performers who are great. Ava Grusser on first violin, Patty Davis, second violin, Lois Martin, viola, and Bruce Wong, cello.
I only know Lois Martin, who's a fantastic violist.
And they're all great, yeah.
Okay, so let's see if I can do it this time now.
Okay.
Share screen.
Hey, John, if you want to go to 5 minutes and 30 seconds. If you want to go to 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
It doesn't have the exact numbers on
That's
it.
okay. That's okay. Just go a little bit.
Okay. Will do.
Yeah, go back just a little bit, Johnny.
Okay.
Johnny?
Yes.
Johnny, go to like the last couple minutes, please.
Okay.
Okay.
That work?
Yeah, that worked. It's just a few excerpts there.
All
Not
right,
the
thank you. So I had some notes that this is your way to get what you called innermost soul. And I was noticing that, a majority of your works use glissando. And I'm thinking that glissando, by having that always present, and this might be true for everyone here, kind of disguises equal temperament. So an equal temperament relationship doesn't have that same harmonic relationship when the glissando is present.
Okay.
Do you buy that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that in my music, very simple intervals are important, and very simple pitch movement is important. It's not anything like Western harmony, but yet it's very familiar. I mean, for example, I'll use something like a major third glissing up to another major third by a half tone, okay, and then glissing down. That could be, say, a very a move like without too much tension, just kind of moving up and down. And sometimes seconds will do the same, moving up by a half tone or a full tone and moving back to the pitch. That's kind of a movement without too much tension. Towards the end of a piece like this, the type of harmonic movement that I use goes from typically a perfect fourth resolving outward to a perfect fifth. So it would be like something like in this piece, the very last pitch movements, harmonic, if you will, movements are from F and B flat out to E and B. So, I mean, my pitches are very simple, actually.
It doesn't even seem to be about the pitches.
Yeah, it's often based on the instruments and what, for example, in this piece, starting off with a relatively small pitch range.
That's what I was getting at. It's about bandwidths.
Well, yeah, it's like a pitch range in this case, in the middle section. You can't get this from the excerpts we just played, but then kind of eventually moving upward to as high as the violins can play, and then having the cello and the viola like break off and go way down, and then you end up with like this huge like the biggest kind of pitch range you can get from those instruments kind of to end the piece. So yeah, it's an organization not of harmony like in Western music, but of a lot of different things, including what I just said. A lot of times the glissandi are organized so that, say, in the beginning of a piece, I might use a certain type of glissando. In this case, it was the arpeggiated, the tremolo gliss going down. So you start with glissandi going down. Eventually you take out the tremolo, and there are no tremolos for a while. And the glissandi, the direction of the glissandi, a lot of them are moving up, 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 until you finally get to the end. And then you've got a tremolo glissandi coming back and just moving across the range, the pitch range of the instruments.
We've been talking a lot at Moo about ephemera and how, clouds can appear in Lamont Young's piano.
Mm-hmm.
And, interesting to me is that glissando is not really ephemera because it's a physical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yet it opens the door to ephemera.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know Eduardo is doing that. When I hear the way, Eduardo, your piano begins with a gliss on the piano, which is, an interesting gliss in itself. But when you hear it, it's a gliss. It's not different string points. And I don't know how you got that to happen so nicely like that. But this idea of the gliss opening up lets in a kind of a different listening. This again brought me to Xenakis when I brought that name up.
Yeah, I mean, Xenakis has always been one of my favorites. And again, I came of age at the time where a lot of music departments were teaching 12-tone music. But there were some Western composers who were dealing with what I call texture. I mean, Xenakis to me fell into that category. Music like Phil Niblack's, for example. I don't know if people are familiar with his music, but he would use, tracks of, say, 20 cellos, and microtonally, he would record them all, but then mix it together into a very clearly structured piece with pitch movement. But the microtones were like just all over, like a big texture of long tone minimalism. He's kind of one of my heroes. And then you had the more famous minimalists like Philip Glass and others, Terry Riley, Steve Reich, doing another type of minimalism. So that
they didn't do the glissando thing.
No. but yet it was the texture to me. I mean, people hear different things, but to me it was okay. We don't have to worry about using all the 12 tones in a row and that sort of thing. But it was a different kind of take on music, of sound, and I mean the Gagaku kind of was. I was studying that at the same moment as a young musician, a young composer. So I was learning that as well, and trying to get into it, not trying to just copy it, but it was in, once you start memorizing things, especially by your ear, it's like in your soul, it's in your body.
Right, it's this texture thing you're talking about. I know Eduardo is into that.
Yeah.
That's so major part of what he's doing.
Yeah.
And Elia, maybe, to some degree, but what you all four of you have in common, and I'm going to Juhani next, is that you're all really, when you say texture, I'm not sure if you all think of it the way I'm thinking of it, is it's acoustic. You're all really focused on acoustic stuff. And as my friend Stephen, who's here, would talk to, there's a lot of movement to just focus on electronic and computer in our new modern age. And, just a simple instrument by itself has that texture if you think of it as acoustic. Where acoustic is a texture, which could be electronic acoustic. You could mix it with electronics. I guess some of you have done that. But let me go now, if I could. Thank you, Lois. I'm going to move now to Juhani for a moment. Juhani gave me an example today of the flute. And the flute is using glissandi, which is the way, Juhani, you introduced it to me. And yet it also has these microtonal indications by sense that actually detail the detail, because for some people, glissandi don't need that much detail. But Juhani is a very detailed person. Now, one reason might be, Juhani, and you're welcome to, address this, is you do have perfect pitch. And you know, that's come up recently in the paper I'm working on with Vitold, the new book, because we found a person in history by the name of Lorenz, and I won't go into detail about this, but Lorenz had a problem with the tuning system, and it was because of his perfect pitch. But you'd have to know he had perfect pitch, and you'd have to understand how that would change parameters of sound. So when, you know, to shorten my intro again, not so much, it was fascinating to hear that you're in noise now, because you weren't always so interested in noise as music vocabulary. So please tell us more about this before I even play the example you sent.
Yes, thank you so much. There are many ways to start describing this piece. I hope I won't ruin it for you, so I would prefer to keep it short before listening. So yeah, sure. There is a pitch system that does come from a very finite knowledge of what is going on, and it's a glissando flute that I have to specify that the instrument itself has a glissando feature built in.
It's
And
Robert
it
Dick.
does
Robert
provide.
Dick.
Yes, exactly. And the player is Erik Rescher from Berlin, and he has his own instrument, and he knows the positions quite well by heart, so he doesn't really have to rely on that many cues or like any markings on the instrument. So what is crucial with this instrument is that when you have a slide that goes up till a minor third down, then you just have to be really careful where where you position, and it does change with register as well. So it's also relative in the register.
I have to say, you're
Makes it
very
harder.
brave. You know, you show a very impressive confidence to have, on the one hand, the secret world of perfect pitch. It's a kind of a secret world. It's in your head. Two, the precision that you can actually designate, which I know from the bassoon piece you wrote for me. But three, to then throw in, you know, you used to put multiphonics and you'd have heard them as pitches. So this is different. You're now opening up to a Xenakis stochasticism, really. The sense that, you know, the glissando is a chaos part for you, because you're so able to detail that to put in glissando is this, it's a kind of very, to me, you know, since I know you, you know, it smacks of the confidence you have in that you are trusting. You know, a lot of people, when you just say the word improvisation in the conservatory, they don't learn how to improvise. It was removed from the conservatory. There was a time when all the great musicians were improvisers. Like Mozart and Beethoven couldn't really even be Mozart and Beethoven if they couldn't improvise, let alone Bach. So now, the reason that people are afraid of improv is they don't know what they're going to produce in advance. But you've now worked it out. You know that whatever happens, it's okay, because you've created the parameters to making it a positive development to the music, which again, to me, has a little Xenakis in it. Do you want to respond?
Yes. I think that it's a good analogy, really. I would also add the analogy of interval-based and timbre-based, because I do write exact intervals here very much, and exact pitches that are based on a system that derives from the exact multiphonics. Actually, 9 multiphonics that I use at piece, they reflect to my individual pitch choices as well in the piece. So I think the glissandi become a timbral device, and then also there's an added noise component because the player is standing on a mat, a PVC mat made of plastic, and so then he's moving his feet to 4 different ways, and each of them also adds a different timbral dimension there. And so I'm playing with this combination of glissandi and multiphonics and the noise from this PVC mat, and it makes a dialect that I really much liked, and I exported
Even more,
in this piece.
even more stochasticism with the mat. right? Because
Yep.
you have now 4 new surprises that you can't even know in advance what's going to happen.
And that's what noise is about. So I'm happy with that. If there are enough limits as to given by notation, then I'm fine with that. I think also there's a famous Xenakis quote that he was also fine with just people getting 70% of the notes right. I'm not quite sure if I'm quoting correctly, but that's I think what was Xenakis' philosophy, and I'm quite along his line there.
I'm going to go right into the video by itself.
Yeah, sure.
And while I do that, Vito, would you find that quote from Xenakis that you can read afterwards that I sent you? Okay, thank you. And so here we go.
Please show the score as well.
Well,
So there's
that
a
might
video
be-
or the audio.
I can't show the score at the same time with a video.
Okay.
With an audio, I can do it, but with a video, it's a little
Yep.
distracting.
There's the audio. So if you play the
We'll do
audio
that.
and then show
Let's do the
score.
video first, and then we can do some of the score.
Yes. There's
So
something on
it's-
the right
it's-
saying that you didn't have it.
Yeah, it's saying
I think
it's not.
Vitot also has it in the email, in case you can't open it, or if you can try the audio.
Okay, then we'll have to try that. Let's see what we've got here.
There must be something wrong with the download, probably.
Well, I saw it
So,
earlier.
but it's missing.
Let's see. This is your score. So we'll start with that. These sense markings all come from multiphonics?
Yes, I think so. So the multiphonics have exact cent markings, and then I'm working interval based. So each of the multiphonics has a stable position in the first position of the slide, so in which no sliding is done yet. And from those multiphonics, I derive the different intervals. And then from those intervals, I create for each of these textures, 5 different textures in this piece. I create different combinations of intervals, and that's where I derive the steady pitches or the structural pitches for the piece.
Gotcha. So we're back to this problem. And so I'm not sure I can play it right now. Vito, did you have ability to play it?
Not right now currently because I'm obviously live streaming to YouTube, but I have the quote prepared. Maybe you can try the audio file that Juhani prepared, not the video, just the audio.
Do you have it?
It should be in the same email.
Yeah.
Why don't you read the quote by Xenakis?
Okay, I will read the quote then. Do not think in pitches, but in sound process, said D-Force, who frequently performs Xenakis' demanding solo cello pieces, known as Alpha and Kotos. The perspective has been one of the big game changers Xenakis realized in Western art music. That's the quote.
Nice. So we're having trouble. I'm so sorry. It played before and it's not playing now. If we can get it playing before the end, I'll do it. But I think at least we saw the score, which shows, for those of us who can hear numbers, you know, we have now imagined your piece as a solo.
Johnny, just check the WeTransfer zip file that Juhani sent, and there should be also
Yeah, I did.
just the audio. So
Oh, just the audio? Okay, we'll try
Yeah.
that. Please hold on. This is complicated. So if I do this, Elia or Eduardo, do you have something else you could play for us?
Another piece.
Yeah, Eduardo, would you like to maybe, Elia, maybe prepare something, another little segment, something that shows contrast to the first?
Yeah, if you want, Elia.
Go ahead, if you could, Eduardo.
Me?
It could be either of you, or we can do them in succession. But it's something short, and then I'll have a chance to find Juhani's sound.
Okay.
So share screen
Okay. Just
and stereo.
contrast. Just
Yeah. You can introduce it too.
okay. It's another piece for large, not too large ensemble. It's a backtrack. And this piece, different than other, the microtons, it's a little more like different from others. And always is all the pieces in movement, movement, like a little glissandos or sustain, but all the chords on the chords is not the same, but because it's a little different with dynamics or a little attacks and all the time in the piece. The beginning is a little more piano, more all mezzo piano, but and the next part is a little more forte, and the last is a big contrast with a solo guitar, more like a Jimi Hendrix feedbacks. No blues, no jazz, but or rock, more like feedbacks. This is the score, but I have a video. The piece is 30 minutes. I don't know if you want. I put a little.
Please play perhaps about 3 minutes, maybe, of a good spot.
3 minutes. You have.
And everybody else, please mute.
You have to the beginning or the middle, or I don't know.
Well, take the beginning.
Okay. I have put just the video or the sound and score.
I think video.
Video. Okay, great.
Eduardo? That's terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice surprises, because when I knew you in Mexico, it was, you didn't have any of these pieces, did you?
Yeah, it's just when you stay here in Monterrey, for me, it's just a little. I have a festival I organize, but after this, I am focused in the composition totally, and right now this way, just
It's a burning
this
fire.
compose.
It's a burning fire for you. Well, thank you.
No, thank
That's
you.
a nice, and it fits the theme that we've
Yeah.
kind of developed, And now I would like to go to Juhani's piece, which I have now found a sound for. So here we go. Well, we're going to leave it there. This is a 19.5-minute solo. And, you know, what's interesting also is you pitted a soloist against not really a solo. You know, there's the room, there's the pads, there's the indications that are, you know, remind me actually of Julio Estrada, was another person that comes up with Eduardo and also comes up actually with Elia, because Julio Estrada once told me he's a Phoenician in his ancestry. So, you know, whether that has anything to do with these color effects of sound that so many of you are interested in. I don't know, Lois, if you have come across Maestro Estrada's music.
No, but I will check it out.
It's the piece I had to play of his had 5 staves simultaneously on the page in a collage of decision making with sounds sort of like Juhani is trying to have the flute player get. I'm not sure, did the flute player give you, Juhani, what you were looking for?
Mostly, yeah. I was mostly satisfied. As you saw, there were some indications for many phrases to be longer, so then you can dive into the sound much more, so the immersion could be much more full.
He may have felt the way I felt, which is we're trying to be literal for you. And then when we look at the score, we see the score is more detailed than the sound, which is rare. You would agree?
I guess the details do come into play when you have the scope of 20 minutes. So, for example, if you are referring to, let's say, the whistle tones that also have microtonal notation, I think it makes sense once you have the whole build-up, because this is really built on intervals. So the intervals are a structural thing, and for many of my pieces, intervals don't play a structural role.
I found, so obviously I found some kind of connection between all 4 of you. I'm finding, you know, ways, you know, maybe it's subconscious on my part, you know, by having this group. Elia, would you like to provide another piece of music? We can't, you're muted right now.
Yes. I have many pieces
I have
which
one of yours.
deal with the tradition. Yes, please, if you have
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to present one with acoustic traditional instruments, not necessarily Lebanese, you know, traditional acoustic Western instruments that use quarter tones, I guess, and maybe smaller than that. But let's see if I can be as good as my word and actually be able to provide it. So you'll be surprised when I actually get it. So let's see.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I'm not scrolling.
Yeah, very fast.
Sorry, I almost
Yes.
cut off that last note there. I put it back in. You had some interesting notation there as well. I mean, it wasn't strict quarter tone, was it?
Yes, there are many things. It's not only the traditional three-quarter tones here, the Arabic three-quarter tone, but I have used also other like microtonal details. For example, in the percussions there was the Malay cat, and it was one can tune it and program the tuning, and I've made many scales which I like to use in microtonality. One of the ideas is to use scales that are where all the notes are consonant with each other, and not necessarily the overtone scale. But I've made such a system where I use that. I have used that once in my composition.
So
here it's not only about yes.
Well, I didn't want to cut you off. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to say that it's not only about the Arabic tradition, but I wanted to make a balance between the emotional aspect always present in the Arabic music. It's always the Arabic music is mostly very emotional, and in my opinion, in my feelings, I have the maqamat are always linked to the emotional aspect in me. While in this piece, I'm very inspired by Carl Gustav Jung, that makes that speaks of the psychological functions, where there is also the instinct, the intuition, and the intellect in addition. So I tried in this piece to make a balance between all those functions somehow in the music.
I only was going to interrupt because you said the word consonant. Now, for us at MU, we basically take this as a cultural construct. Yeah. Because, we can see I'm a promoter of higher harmonics as consonants, for example.
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, we came across this emotional definition. When the notes love each other, it's consonant. I don't know. Would you accept that?
Yes, sure.
Okay, well, it's a very nice way to put, to handle that term. Again, using English. Anybody here would like to ask a question or like to make a comment? Because we've reached the end of our presentation, it seems. I think we covered a lot. Stephen?
Yeah, just first of all, two comments. One, everyone's music, absolutely fantastic, highly unique, and with great attention to detail. I wanted to follow up on your question, Johnny. You brought up about glissando. I wanted to pose a question. Could it be, depending on the context, perhaps to a greater or lesser degree, that glissando is sort of can function as a reminder of the infinity of existence? So here we choose to operate within a tonal system of any sort, microtonal or whatever. In the moment of those glissandos, you're reminded, like a skylight, that the entire range of sound is much broader than we are experiencing in any given moment. And I was just going to throw it out there as sort of a metaphoric way to look at glissando and its function, and wanted to know how people felt about that.
Stephen, I really like what you said. I mean, to me, the glissando is natural. In other words, when you're outside, you hear the wind, you hear the water, you hear birds. I mean, there's nothing like a tempered scale out there in nature. Right. So I really appreciate what you said. Yeah.
Thank you.
This is maybe a bigger word would be continuum.
Yeah. That's what we all exist in. And then, like Lois says, you know, in another way of speaking, life is microtonal completely. I mean, it's the continuum is what we're walking and breathing every day. And it's an abstraction to filter out only a given number of frequencies. But that makes it easier to work with. It's very, very hard to work with the continuum as the be all end all. You can get lost in it. You know, like Stravinsky says, you're free when you set your own limits. I've always loved that oxymoronic concept of his. Another question I wanted to ask Juhani, as a micro-intervallic composer with perfect pitch, what are you finding experientially is the resolution of your perfect pitch? Can you hear, like I noticed in your score, you had a B natural that was 6 cents sharp. Can you really pull that out of the air, or is that something you would need to hear in context to know if that note is being played in tune?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's where I also combine relative hearing. So yeah, my perfect pitch is not so exact, and it's very much tied to my being as a singer. So for me, it's also a physiological thing that I look at the pitches in my own vocal apparatus. So that's quite common for singers. So I mentalize myself as the flute when I'm hearing the flute. So I don't really know how I'm doing it, but that's how I would discern the pitches. I would say within a semitone, I might discern 10 pitches, so that makes like 10 cents difference. That's I guess that's the definition I would have. And then always in context, when I have intervallic context, then I see I hear much more clear. But when we're speaking only of individual pitches outside a melodic context, then it's going to be perhaps 10 cents definition.
I'm always fascinated with the cultural implications of that ability. You know, because growing up, when I heard about people with perfect pitch, I just figured it meant they could know an A flat when they hear it. But what about all the other A flats and G sharps and all the gradations? Can those be pulled out of the air? Like, that one is 22 cents flat. You know, I mean, do you think that's possible? Have you done that?
Oh yeah, I think it's possible. There's also a difference between producing the pitches or just recognizing them. I think I'm better at recognizing pitches. I don't know where it comes from studio practice or something. But yeah, it would be really helpful for a singer to also be able to produce all those microtonal pitches really fastly and accurately. But yeah, I think I'm better at listening.
Theoretically, that can be learned, right? In other words,
yes,
because you have a physiological analog to them that kind of bolts it down as a. I have a friend that's like non-musical, can't carry a tune, but when you ask him what is your note, he always hits a B natural. He can sing it. He can pull it out of the air. That's my note. And I've checked him on an oscilloscope, and it's like, wow. For someone who doesn't have any knowledge of a musical concept, he has a physiological feeling, just like a violin player knows where a certain note is from muscle memory. you would find the same thing, that this could be. I'm always curious as to what's the limit of how far you can educate yourself to have your body remember these in very, very fine gradations.
I have no idea. It's also something that I'm not actively trying to do, because most of the repertoire doesn't call for that. As a
Right.
choral singer, I very much I premiere new pieces that have noise. Let's say they might have some microtonality. My own pieces have microtonality, but it's very limited, and the accuracy called for in those pieces is limited as well.
Yeah. Anyway, beautiful work.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing it.
Hey,
Joe?
Stephen,
Yeah. Hey, Joe.
I think, the perfect pitch thing really, obviously, varies considerably with each individual. One
Right.
person I know who I was amazed at his pitch discrimination is Mike Battaglia. I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure you're familiar with him.
Yeah, you're remarkable.
I met him just before my father died, and he came over to my father's house while I was there and was playing his Sweet Lorraine, improvisation on my father's out of tune piano. But he was telling me, it's roughly about a quarter tone flat, but he was, it was out of tune. So he was just amazing at how he could pick out different notes and how out of tune they were from 12 EDO,
Yeah, amazing that it wouldn't bother him either.
Well, it did bother him a little bit.
It didn't stop it.
It bothered him a little bit, but he just took the microtonality of it in stride.
This is important, Joe. This is a difference in listening between comparing things
Yeah.
as opposed to just listening to its beauty.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're comparing something, you're more critical, you're going to be more detailed, and you're not going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a deep comment. Irv used to talk about that too, about the kind of nagging tendency to want to compare a note to what the culture says is the proper one. And even just the idea of so many cents sharp or flat implies a kind of sovereignty to the 12-tone equal. I mean, I'm not critical of that, because we need something to push against and to measure against. But I always say it's always better to erase the ruler and draw different inches than it is to measure something like how far from 1 inch, how far from 2 inch. And a lot of what I think what all of us are engaged in is different ways of redrawing the ruler and even the size of the ruler.
I also, this comparative listening is probably a very high level, perfect pitch kind of ability, which can get in the way, I imagine, of your enjoyment of what you're doing. So you might want to just turn it off. The fact that you can bring in a relative pitch is something you've had to acquire, isn't it, Juhani?
Yes, very much so. And you're talking about listening strategies. Also, less pitch-based listening strategies are the way to go, I think, for many of the current repertoire.
So this reaction against pitch leads to gestures, leads to what all four of you are interested in. It's almost less of a labeling, which again is English, is verbal intelligence, and more of, I want to just make beauty, and I just hope that people have receptivity for it. Though some of the beauty, Juhani, is in your head, because you can see it in the score, which may increase your ability to handle the so-called dissonance of life, because you've got this a model, a paradigm that's internalized that you probably can't share very easily, but it makes for 100% devotion to what you're doing. Would that be fair?
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you, everyone.
May I ask Lois a
Colleen.
question? Thank you.
Hi, Colleen.
Lois, you mentioned that the titles come later, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that. Is that then a situation where the music comes? Maybe you could talk about what some of the impetuses might be, but when the title comes, is that a process where, almost like with a piece of poetry, where you discover what you meant in a way?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, I think the main impetus for the music, I mean, for me, is the instruments in front of me. It's very tangible, exactly what the instrument can do. And I love to sit there with the player and have them play something as high as possible, as low as possible, as soft as possible, as loud as possible. Even if it's an instrument I've worked with 20 times before, I like to have that kind of in my head. And then, I mean, I think for me, there's a lot of just movement, not just of sound, but of, physical movement, like wind, like I talked about before, wind and waves and things like that. And so sure, I put those all into the sounds and then kind of craft a piece out of those sounds that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then that's when I think, now, what can this piece be named? And some things, like, for example, I did feel water, the sounds of water, with all of those glissandi going down and just the flow of the string sounds. So that was kind of an easy name to come up. I mean, none of the names are easy for me, but that one was apparent when I came on that title. I don't know if I've answered your question at all.
Yeah, sure. So then in that sense, maybe the pieces tend to not really be programmatic, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
They're not programmatic. No, not at all. It's kind of trying to capture in words some of the essence of the sound.
Some of it, but as Juhani likes to point out, that you can't really talk about music completely effectively.
Yes, true. Yeah, it's trying to capture some of the essence, and then I run it by my friends and family before I name it. And in fact, some of my titles have come from other people, just to see if the words have the same impact to me as they might have to others. But yeah, I think that's fair. Some of the essence of the sound.
So if I'm interpreting you correctly, Lois, the title is in complement with the music. It doesn't override it. It doesn't tell you what the music is, but it's that poetic that Colleen's bringing up, that poetic connection that complements it so that it is something greater than it is without a title at all.
Yeah, it's kind of a handle for a human to deal with this abstraction called sound, and sound in time. I always think of time as kind of the most fundamental thing we deal with as composers, time. So it's a handle. It's a handle to deal with this chunk of time that's called a piece of music.
The only thing about time is you could stop it at any point and get a number. But when you say water and you say air and possibly even tidal, you cannot do that. You cannot find a point in between it. That fluidity that you're creating. I'm just curious, if I can, Lois, do you know the work of Gloria Coates?
Yes, somewhat. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because, she seems to have developed a lifetime of composition with glissando as well.
Yeah. I just think it's so natural, and people who use it if they use it, it tends to be natural because it's kind of outside of what you learn in music school. I mean, things are changing, but yeah.
Well, from this session and from your music, I'm getting this sense that, as I said already, I don't need to repeat it, but it's so somehow important for the clarity, which is a word that you've used. And, all of you you all use very clear textures. You're not interested in the orchestra necessarily blurring together, as opposed to, this clear texture thing goes back to Bach, whether you need to hear a big orchestra play the Brandenburg or you want to hear one instrument on each line. When the tuning is different for Bach and it's well temperament and it's irregular, that becomes clarity. That is the clarity you get that you lose if you have everybody playing one so-called intended sound. So the act of having the glissandi ever present erases the harmonic expectations. So that, just saying thirds, Lois, you never say equal tempered thirds necessarily. Though we're trying not to say perfect fifths anymore and perfect fourths if they're not perfect. I mean, then what is perfect, And then we start using words again and we started getting in trouble because, you could say there's no perfection in music. And if you record somebody's breathing, the engineer doesn't want to take the breath out. Because that's what shows the phrasing, that's what shows the humanity. And the acoustic factor is another humanity thing that I hope doesn't mean I'm saying I'm against electronics as non-humanity. But there is definitely something that I'm emphasizing today with the acoustic richness that you all get. So I thank you all very, very much. And it's been a pleasure. Listen, Colleen, you want to say one more thing?
Well, I don't want to hold things up, but I just wanted to say I thought of this, Eduardo, when I listened to your kurtosis piece, but I think Juhani or Elia could speak to it as well. That it's just such a pleasure, intensely beautiful music that you're playing. That one of the things about being sort of on the windowsill of this microtonal world is peering in and noticing, enjoying the international nature of it. It's one of the really cool parts of it. And yet when I listen to the different music and, you can talk about Macomb and so on, it's perhaps a deficiency of mine, of which there are so many, but I don't really hear the national or the native influence as much. I hear lots of common global kinds of sounds that I hear from American composers sometimes. So I don't know if anybody would completely disagree with that, or if anybody had any thoughts about it. Or if
I think it's a really,
you don't need
no,
it.
I think it's a great observation because I was thinking also in a similar lines about the distribution of sounds in time and how the Western classical composer of the late 20th century and early 21st think of that. And sometimes the way that things are phrased, my wife, I guess, derisively calls it blip bleep music. In the fact that there's a kind of when you compare it to, say, traditional pop music or traditional ethnic music, where it's generally isorhythmic, right? There's like a beat that you can certainly follow. Classical composers tend to instinctively get away from that because it sounds like something else right away, right? So I think and there are multiple ways that composers have chosen to kind of create their own concept of time and the placement of notes within those. And that takes a lot of study, I find, to find the differences between how each composer's aesthetic varies. But they're all in a group in that they're not this sort of four on the floor, metronomic, except for maybe in minimalism and styles, genres like that are where the repetitive rhythm is part of the definition. I don't know. Does that answer your question or raise other ones? Or I know it's a source of controversy, but I'm glad you raised it because I think that's a very legitimate observation.
Yeah, I would be surprised how many of you identify as classical musicians. I mean, let's ask. I mean, let's not assume. We're basically interstylistic here at Microtonal University. So, I wouldn't actually use that term, classical music, anymore. I actually don't think of myself that way. But, it depends partly, I guess, on where you live and whether your culture around you is part of what you're expressing versus your, Elia, you said you wanted to be independent of saying it's an Arabic music, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think, Eduardo, you probably want to be independent of saying it's Mexican music, right? I'm guessing. No, you're not sure. Okay, see, that's the difference. Juhani, do you think of your music as Finnish?
No, not really.
No, okay.
Short answer.
And now it's to Lois. Are you an American composer of classical
Yes.
music?
Absolutely.
Of classical music?
Well, I mean, my background is double. It's in classical music for sure. It's in Beethoven, it's in Bach, and it's also in Gagaku. So
Okay.
I think like
Okay.
one of the, I don't know if you know Dean Rosenthal at all.
A little bit.
Yeah, he's a writer and composer, but he has a theory of American music, which it goes beyond what classical music is, and it takes in other influences, just like kind of our American idea of ourselves. So, in that sense, I consider myself very much an American composer. And
When I
Would you
think
say
of
that
a-
has to do with the way we our souls metabolize influences culturally? I mean, I identify with what you say. I mean, I grew up on Jimi Hendrix, but I studied Luciano Berio, and they're
Yeah.
both in me. I can't get them out. They
Yeah.
come out in the music, right? And
But
so,
it-
can you say, well, you're a Berio follower? No. You're a Hendrix knockoff? No. Right? But somehow those two find a way to in all of us, right? Are different influences, I think, to coalesce.
I totally relate to that. I mean, sometimes people will listen to certain of my pieces and they'll say, "Oh, you're writing Japanese music," and I say, "I never ever try to write Japanese music. I never tried to write German music. I mean, my heritage is German. I never try either one, but it's in you because you spent so much time with Hendrix and with whomever else." And I feel the same. For me, it's Beethoven and Gagaku.
Yeah. And that what makes you unique. I think the fact that
Yeah,
those two parts of you come together.
yeah. So now I'm gonna make sure I listen to some of your music now.
Okay. I think we met actually way back when
Did
in
we?
Los Angeles, early 80s. Were you a member of the Independent Composers
Yes.
Association? Okay.
Yeah.
I just came on the scene kind of around that time.
Oh my goodness.
David Ocker. And
Yeah.
I forget who else. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, it's coming back to me. Yeah.
Okay. And you had a piece called Go Guitars. Go meaning
Yes.
5 in Japanese, right?
It's 5. Yeah. Go.
Yeah.
The character is pronounced go, but it means 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all coming back to me now.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Great. Well, good to see you again after 40
Yeah,
years.
You too.
So, anyone else that hasn't spoken yet? this is where Stephen usually says to John, do you have something to offer, to add?
Yeah, John Chalmers, where are you?
Praveen, show yourself. Don't just write chats. Say something if you want to ask a question.
Oh, I haven't read the
Make a
chat.
comment. Unless you can't, unless there's an issue with the camera.
I would like to say something. I'd like to add something else. Yeah, going back to Stephen's observation about the glissandi. I think it was really interesting to say that, you know, maybe that's like our window into the infinite, but also I find it very evocative of spoken language.
Yeah.
When you're speaking, you know, the pitch is all over the place. There are definitely spots, frequencies that are, or I don't know if you want to call them frequencies or ratios or whatever, but there are definitely pitches that are emphasized or sustained at certain points, but in between that, it's just gliding all over everywhere.
Maybe so ghost pitches. Like when you do a glissando, you have the opportunity to have ghost pitches, right? You can emphasize.
What do you mean by ghost?
Well, you can have landings or places where you slow the gliss down, right? There is so much color you can still do with it.
Yeah. But in spoken language, you know, there's just so much. I really would love to see analyses of spoken language and, you know, pitch analysis, because it's so malleable. I mean, I don't know what word I could even use to describe it. But
so my response, Joe, is like this. Joe.
Well, if you find anything, Monzo, let me know.
Well, I mean, decades ago, when I first got into microtonality, you know, it was through Parch. Parch was definitely the first main influence on me. And I was very interested in making movies where the spoken dialogue was harmonized, like very explicitly in just intonation or microtonal. You know, I never really followed through on that idea of projects, but I definitely had some ideas on those and wanted to do that.
I did that with my piece, Raven. Go ahead.
Just a response to Joe. I'm not sure if you know Peter Ablinger, the Austrian composer. He has this series called Voices and Piano. So Voices and Piano, where he does analyze really well-known speakers and does transcribe them to piano and the tape. So I think you should take a look at that series of pieces.
Okay.
Peter Ablinger.
Okay. And thank you for that. And another thing that I can think of along the same lines is Charles Dodge did this terrific computer like deconstruction and reconstruction of Caruso's famous aria from I Pagliacci. And, you know, the da, 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 but he took it apart and did so many, in many cases, very humorous things with it. Dodge had a great sense of humor. And, you know, he just built his whole own separate piece out of the 1902 or whatever it was recording that Caruso made for Victrola Records. So that was an interesting thing because Dodge was very interested in computer synthesis of speech. I studied with him for one semester, and that was one of his big things, was synthesizing speech. This was back in 1984. And the name of that piece was Any Resemblance Here is Purely Coincidental. Anyway.
And so, of course, the lipo, you know, come to mind as the whole, you know, raison d'etre for Harry Parch to compose is to follow American pitch in how we speak. And I did want to bring out this, I did experiment with this, with a piece of mine called Raven, where I had an actor, Paul Savior, speak the poem, and certain words in the poem had quotations around them. So I made those parts aloud by taking the actual pitch that he put into a recording, and then take those pitches, sort of like Juhani did with the multiple notes, to make them the harmony. And then I wrote it for bassoon and trombone, and we just did a duet, of the raven at the door, the actual what he says. I feel, and this is that internal world, Juhani, I feel I can hear him speaking through the sound that's made. And that's just we have to do this as composers, to be creative, to make circles of language and music, which is so obviously related to each other and yet distinctive. And it's a different take also. It's a different avenue of approach. And yes, Dodge is very famous in that area.
And by the way, Raven is my favorite of your pieces.
Wow.
Of all the pieces by you that I know, that's my favorite one.
Maybe that's the reason.
Possibly, yeah.
I don't know, maybe it affected you.
Resonates with me, I guess, because this has been an idea of mine for a long time now, and I never actually have brought it to fruition. It's, maybe if I live long enough someday, I finally will.
Well, just to throw this last bit in there, is that Edgar Allan Poe suggested it. He suggested that you make music out of what he wrote. So I found some of his writing about it, and that helped. I'd already decided on it, but that certainly gave me encouragement.
And the notation for it, you can call tintintabulation.
Yeah, I mean, you can see with the way he wrote his poetry that it's in music and speaking is like, two sides of a coin. But so if that's it for now, because this is a long one for us, without stopping the recording, which we don't have to do because it's on YouTube. And so thank you all. It's been such a pleasure. Hopefully we'll be in touch. And take care.
Okay. Bye until next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.